Hello and welcome to today's poem. Today's poem is called Mametz Wood and it's written by a famous modern Welsh poet called Owen Sheers. However, it features looking back at World War One. So, as a reminder, how to study poetry at home. It's really important that as you're watching this video, you pause it to ensure that you annotate the poem. You must make sure that your annotations have notes on the context, so the background of the poem, the language, so the words and phrases and what they suggest to us, and of course the structure of the poem, how it's organised. It's also important that you have read the poem yourself a couple of times before you watch the analysis here. If you don't have your own copy of the poem, you can print out a copy. There is one attached to this work, or you can create a list of notes to glue into your exercise books, or you could write the poem out in full and then annotate it. Okay, so let's have a look at the background. The title Mametz Wood comes from a very famous battle from the First World War. And if you have a look at the picture there, what you can see in front of you is Mametz Wood itself. It was a wood in France. Now, it was the objective of the 38th Welsh Division during the First Battle of the Somme. And their objective was to take those woods from the German army who were occupying the woods at the time. And this took place between the 7th and the 12th of July 1916. So by the 12th of July, the wood was effectively cleared of the enemy. However, the Welsh division had lost 4,000 men through the retaking of it. So that was 4,000 killed or wounded. And when you think about it, a small bunch of trees in the middle of a French field, that affected 4,000 lives. And Sheers wrote this poem because he felt that the sacrifice of those Welsh soldiers, those men and boys, was never fully acknowledged by the British government. And he felt that this would be a way to give them the remembrance that they deserve for the sacrifice that they made. So when you read the poem in a moment, there are 3 pieces of vocabulary that might be new to you. Can I suggest once I've been through them that you pause the video and then you write this onto the poem? So first of all, the Danse Macabre. That was a dance of death. And in the next slide, I'm going to give you a bit of the background to that. There's also a chit, okay? And a chit is a tiny piece, a fragment of something. Often you can imagine a chit being a tiny piece broken off a china ornament. And last of all, sentinel. A guard could be called a sentinel, but you can also stand sentinel, and that means that you stand guarding over something. So make sure that you write those pieces of vocabulary down. Before we read the poem, I just want to go into a little bit more detail about this idea of the Danse Macabre that comes up in the poem. And the picture that we see there represents the idea of the Danse Macabre. So it comes from the French language, and as I said, translated into English, it means dance of death. Okay, it's an artistic genre, so a type of art of allegory in the late Middle Ages. And it's about something we might call the universality of death. In other words, no matter one's station in life, no matter who you are, whether you're the president, whether you own the richest company in the world, or whether you're a poor person living on the streets, the Danse Macabre unites all. In other words, all of us are united in death. And what that means is that we all will die one day. And the idea of the Danse Macabre is that paintings would be put together or crafted of kind of different people from different walks of life, whether it's as I say, a beggar, a vicar, a politician, and they will dance together because they're united together. So it consists of the dead, or a personification of the dead, summoning representatives from all walks of life to dance along to the grave. Typically a pope, an emperor, a king, a child, and a labourer. And these paintings were produced to remind people of the fragility of their lives, how vain were the glories of earthly life, i.e., that once we die, all of those things that matter to us will not matter anymore. So let's have a look at the poem Mametz Wood. To start with, I'd just like you to listen, and after you finish listening, read it through once more. Mametz Wood. For years afterwards, the farmers found them, the wasted young, turning up under their plough blades as they tended the land back into itself. A chit of bone, the china plate of a shoulder blade, the relic of a finger, the blown and broken bird's egg of a skull, all mimicked now in flint, breaking blue in white across this field, where they were told to walk, not run, towards the wood and its nesting machine guns. And even now, the earth stands sentinel, reaching back into itself for reminders of what happened, like a wound working a foreign body to the surface of the skin. This morning, 20 men, buried in one long grave, a broken mosaic of bone linked arm in arm, their skeletons paused mid-Danse Macabre, with boots that outlasted them, their socketed heads tilted back at an angle, and their jaws, those that have them, dropped open, as if the notes they had sung have only now, with this unearthing, slipped from their absent tongues. So, one of the reasons that Owen Sheers wrote this poem is that he was visiting France. And one day he read in the newspaper that some farmers were ploughing a field, and they uncovered, right next to Mametz Wood, they uncovered some the skeletons of a group of Welsh soldiers who had perished in the battle. And this poem is kind of based on that, the unearthing of these skeletons from, almost 100 years ago. Let's have a look at the poem closely. At this point, it's important that you're making notes on the poem itself. If you haven't got a copy, as I said, write one out or print one out, because you're going to need this for your revision notes. So let's look at the first stanza. For years afterwards, the farmers found them, and the them being referred to here are the soldiers, the dead who were buried under the fields. The wasted young. Take a moment to reflect on that phrase, wasted young. It seems like almost like an oxymoron, young and wasted. How can a young person be wasted? When something's wasted, it's usually finished with, thrown away. And it also suggests this idea of the futility of the fragility of youth, how fragile these young people are, and how quickly their lives were taken away. And these were these were young men who could have made something in their lives. They could have been great doctors or artists. They could have changed the world in all sorts of ways, but their youth was wasted. Their lives were wasted by the battle. Now, these young men were turning up under their plough blades, the farmers' plough blades, that is, as they tended the land back into itself. So this is a reference to the farmers ploughing the field, but it also has a metaphorical undertone to it. Look at that verb, tended. Okay, if we tend to something, we help it. We try to heal it. And Owen Sheers, throughout this poem, uses the semantic field of healing almost as if the land still has to heal itself, to mend itself of the horrific memories that were suffered there. There's a sense in this poem that nature itself was damaged, almost irreparably by the war. Then look at the next stanza. A chit of bone, the china plate of a shoulder blade. So these are the bits of the bodies that are being unearthed by the plough blades. Let's start with china plate. Okay. This is being used as a metaphor to describe the shoulder blade. And it's interesting, I think, the way that something very precious and easily broken is used as a metaphor for the lives of these young men, or the parts of their body. And then the relic of a finger. That's interesting because it's an unusual word choice. There are associations with archaeology here. You would tend to see a relic in a museum. And I think Sheers is pointing to the fact that even though this wasn't a long forgotten past, this was hardly Roman times. This was only 100 years ago. These men and the horrific ordeal they had to go through has been largely forgotten. And look also, look also at the bird's egg, just like the china plate, that notion that it's easily broken. And also an egg, so often the sign of new life, just like those soldiers, yet fragile and easily broken. Now, throughout this bit, just the bits that I've highlighted in blue there for you, a chit of bone, china, ch, pl, blah, blah, b, b, ska. Now, these are hard-sounding consonants. We call them plosives, the ch, p, and b. We call them plosives because when you say them, you release a little bit of air out of your mouth. It kind of explodes out. Pause the video for the moment. Just try that yourself. Ch, p, b. Put your hand in front of your mouth. Don't worry, no one's watching you. And I think that Owen Sheers has done this because these sounds almost recreate the rattle of machine guns. They take us back in sound form, at least, to those horrific moments at Mametz Wood. And they just emphasize the sheer horror of the battlefield. We can almost hear it coming back to life again. Now, the third stanza, all mimics now in flint. Okay, this idea that that the flint, the stone that's coming up, is it's very similar to the bones, breaking blue and white across this field, where they were told to walk, not run. Now that bit's really important because what we know about the historical accounts of Mametz Wood is that the soldiers were told to walk towards the wood. Remember that picture? If you were walking on an open field towards a wooded area, the German soldiers would have been able to see you and you wouldn't have been able to see them. You would have been completely open and very vulnerable to their fire. And yet, what you would not want to do is to walk because it would take longer. Yet the generals told the soldiers to walk, and it was almost a suicidal mission. And of course, many more died because they were obedient to what they were asked to do. Okay, towards the wood, and it's nesting machine guns. Note the word nesting there. It's quite ironic, the use of this adjective, because normally nesting has very positive connotations of comfort, security, family, being at home. Yet here it's used to describe the machine guns. The wood, so often a place of rest and a home for animals and birds, has become a place of extreme danger and threat. Now, stanza 4. And even now the earth stands sentinel. So again, the earth is being kind of personified. It's standing here as a guard. And in the next line, we see why, reaching back into itself for reminders of what happened. So The earth has hidden its memory underneath its surface, the memories of the dead from that battle at Mametz Wood. However, like a wound, working a foreign body to the surface of the skin. And so these plough blades are quite literally working to bring up the pieces of foreign bodies under the surface of the skin. But this kind of works. Oh, missed that one. This kind of works in two ways, because this idea of a foreign body can also be used to describe, let's say, when you get a splinter in your finger, it's a foreign body. It's something from outside your body that has lodged itself in your finger, and your body will naturally heal itself. If you don't take the splinter out, your body will push it out over a series of days. And it's kind of like what's happening to nature here. It's slowly healing itself. It's slowly revealing the secrets of its past. So there's definitely a double meaning working there. So in the next stanza, Sheers describes in a bit more clarity what's really happening. 20 men buried in one long grave, the ones that Sheers read about in the newspaper. A broken mosaic of bone linked arm in arm. And it was like they were united together in death, almost like in a dance. Okay. And again, we've got that semantic field of archaeology, the mosaic. You'd expect to see a mosaic in a museum, or a Roman mosaic at places like Fishbourne in Sussex. Yet here, it's used to describe these young men. And again, it's that sense of beauty, the beauty of their youth and their fragility, how fragile they are, and they were. And then their skeletons paused mid-Danse Macabre. So when these bodies are unearthed, it's almost as if time stops, it's paused. We immediately are thrown back to those moments in 1916 at Mametz Wood. But again, that idea of equality in death. We don't know who these people were. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know if they were rich or poor. We don't know if they were an army general or just a mere soldier, probably more likely the latter. But now they're all equal in death. And look at the next stanza. How sad is this first line? In boots that outlasted them. As their bodies have rotted away under the ground, as they've been left just as skeletons, that's all that remains. Their boots still live on. And that should never happen. Our boots should never outlast us. Okay? What a tragic and sad image that Owen Sheers has used here. Their socketed heads tilted back at an angle, and their jaws, those that have them, dropped open. Their heads are back at an angle. I think we get a bit of an indication of the pain and anguish and agony that they were going through. Yet their jaws are open as if they're wanting to speak. This is the last stanza and the most powerful. As if the notes that they had sung have only now, with this unearthing, slipped from their absent tongues. First of all, we've got this idea of a song, as if these men finally are singing. And first of all, there is a real connection with Welsh culture here, because singing is considered to be very much a key part of being Welsh. And here the men have finally found their voice. Their story has been heard, albeit so many years after the event that led to their deaths. Then at the end, the last two words, absent tongues. Now, of course, on a literal level, their tongues are absent. They've rotted away. However, there may also be a reference here to the fact that they had a lack of a voice when they were alive. They had to obey their commanders, and they were expected to be to be blindly obedient to their masters, and hence why they died. So once again, a reference. Perhaps Owen Sheers is pointing the blame at the generals that sent these men to their certain death. And I hope you can see here a connection between this poem and Dulce et Decorum Est, the notion that the blame is pointed at the generals. Whereas it's very obvious in Dulce et Decorum Est, in this poem I think it's a little bit more subtle. The overwhelming tone of this poem, especially in this last stanza, is reflection and gentleness. And so let's have a quick look at the structure. So you would have noticed, I hope, that each of the stanzas is 3 lines in length. Very linear, neat, just like the pattern of a ploughed field. So this just goes to amplify the key ideas of the poem. At times, the length of the lines changes, with longer lines breaking up the neat form. And I kind of think that this disruptive pattern could reflect the chits of bone rising out of the ground, disrupting our attempts to forget the past. You know, this whole idea in this poem is that we can't forget the past, that nature will continue to reveal the mistakes that mankind has made in the past. So the poem sort of works through a very simple kind of organization. So the first part focuses on the land itself, then it shifts to the bones of the men, and then the dead soldiers and their voice in the final stanzas. And last of all, and I think this is the most important point, the concluding stanza, the last stanza, brings all the elements together in a song of remembrance. And we get a sense of closure in that final full stop. After their absent tongues, finally these men can be put to rest. Their story has been told, and now we as human beings can reflect on this and move on. There's a real sense of almost a funeral or a memorial in this poem as a chance to put the dead to rest. And I think that's what Owen Sheers was trying to do. And it's one of the reasons why this isn't an angry poem. This is a poem about letting go and perhaps beginning to move on. So, just to summarize, the poem is about the fragility of youth. There's many images of the fragile young men who were mown down, murdered, you might say, in the prime of their youth. It's about the sheer brutality of war. Consider that idea again of the nesting machine guns. Even something as gentle and non-violent as nature has been subverted and turned into an element of warfare. It's about the powerful and the powerless. The powerful who could order those men to walk, not run, and the powerless who were blindly obedient. It's about the healing power of nature, because ultimately nature will heal, memories will heal, and we'll be able to put the past to bed. Yet there are many untold stories of the past. And this poem works almost as a piece of archaeology, a way of digging down into the past, of remembering what happened to those Welsh soldiers in Mametz Wood all those years ago, bringing that back to the surface for all of us and allowing us to go through the process of saying goodbye. And so on that note, ladies and gents, I'll say goodbye to you. Stay safe, and I hope you've enjoyed that poem. And remember, you must make notes on it, and you must complete any other questions and tasks that are set for you. Thank you very much, and goodbye.